Shattering Myths, the murderer, blood dripping from his hands, a cleaver in one hand, a butcher knife in the other, said, "We swear by Almighty Allah, we will never stop fighting you." There are many ayah throughout the Quran that says we must fight them as they fight us, and they are killing Muslims around the world. So I asked my good friend, my expert on Islam, my expert on the Quran and Hadith, is there any religion other than Islam that we find in Allah?
No, only Islam.
Is there any religion other than Islam whose religious book is called the Quran?
No, only Islam.
In the religion of Islam, or is there any religion other than Islam where individuals are known as Muslims?
No, only Islam.
So why did CNN write in the headline to its story on what happened in London, "It's not clear how or why two men attacked a man believed to be a British soldier in the London neighborhood of Woolwich"?
Because CNN is criminal. In fact, most of the Western media, both in Europe and America, are more criminal than the Muslim criminals.
Let me ask you a question, IQ. Let me ask you a question, IQ. Has there ever been an incident where the motive for the attack was more obvious than this brutal murder that took place outside of London?
No. They declared it publicly that they want to murder. They murdered a British citizen in public, in daylight, and they were shouting they will do the same to everybody else who was not a Muslim.
And what were they shouting when they were decapitating him?
Allahu Akbar, of course.
Right. Is that not a confession?
It is a confession. It was the same thing with Fort Hood.
Right.
The officer Nidal. The same.
Yes.
Exactly the same.
Yes. Screaming Allahu Akbar. What did the fundamentalist Muslims who were the suicide bombers of 9/11, who flew planes into America's buildings, what did they scream into the voice recorders as they were becoming suicide bombers?
The same thing, Allahu Akbar. They have to.
When was Allahu Akbar first spoken?
By Muhammad.
And
1400 years ago.
And what was the circumstance of Allahu Akbar being spoken?
When he was attacking Khaybar and when he was attacking every other Arab group that were not Muslim.
Okay, and Kabar, was it a community of one ethnicity, and was that a farming community of a particular ethnicity, or was Kabar a major military establishment that had been threatening the first converts to Islam, and therefore Muhammad had to defend his faithful against their aggressiveness? What was the case with Kabar?
Khaybar was a community of people who worked in the land. They were agriculturists. They were not fighters. They were not an armed group. Muhammad surrounded them, murdered them, enslaved them, and then exiled them.
And what was the primary ethnicity of the farming community of Kabar?
Judaized Arabs.
Correct.
Jews.
Correct. And so when Muhammad first said Allahu Akbar to the Jews, what was he trying to communicate to them?
That he's going to slaughter them.
That my God is greater than your God.
Absolutely.
That would make Allah greater than Yahowah. What is that caused when Yahowah reveals through his prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah, that there was a reason that Satan was expelled from heaven? Hillel ben Shakar is his name. What reason was given for his excommunication?
He disobeyed the Almighty.
Yeah, but far worse than that. What he said is that Satan wanted to be greater than God. That Satan's crime was claiming to be greater than God. Do you see a connection between Allahu Akbar being yelled at the Yehudim, the Jews of Kabar, And
No?
the claim of Satan wanting to be greater than Yahowah?
The same. They are the same.
Yeah,
Islam
it is.
is satanic. We've always said that. It is satanic. It's demonic.
So why did Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, say that there was absolutely no connection between this killing and Islam?
Because he is either stupid, infinitely stupid, or does not know how to handle the situation. And that is what's happening both in America and Europe. The leaders, our leaders, do not know how to handle Islam.
What would you do if you had been Cameron and you wanted to deal with the motivations for this savage murder and virtually 100% of the savagery of the last decade that has been perpetrated against your people? That you've had many attacks. The 7/7 attacks were the worst in England here recently, and they're all perpetrated by Muslims. If you wanted to protect your citizens from the continual threat of Islam, how would you have handled the aftermath of what happened 2 days ago in London?
I don't think you want to know.
No, I do want to know. First of all, let me back up here and say that I began this interview with IQ al-Rassooli without even introducing him. IQ al-Rassooli is the author of Lifting the Veil, the True Voices of Muhammad and Islam. He is, to my mind, and I'm fairly well versed in this subject, the most informed, the most articulate, the most rational spokesperson in the world relative to the true nature of Islam and the correlation between Islam and terrorism. There is no one whom I respect more in this for his courage and for his wisdom and for his ability to articulate the true nature of this religion than IQ al-Rassooli. So it is IQ al-Rassooli who is our guest. And so now, IQ, with that introduction, what would you have done if you had been the Prime Minister?
I would declare publicly that it is Islam and only Islam, based on the Quran, that's committing these mass murders all over the world. Second, I would stop all immigration from Muslim countries. Third, I will investigate every Muslim in the United Kingdom. Any undesirables will be sent out. Human rights, I don't give a damn about human rights when the human rights of the victims are not considered, but the human rights of the criminals are considered.
Right.
I will abjure that. I will.
So what would be your litmus test for determining who needed to be exiled?
Any imam, I will exile instantly.
Okay, so a fundamentalist Muslim, someone preaching Islam, you would exile immediately. And what other standard would you use? I would have a standard as well, but I'm just curious as to what your standard would be.
Well, I would like to hear yours.
Are they a fundamentalist Muslim? Do they concur with the Quran and Hadith? Do they know that Muhammad was a terrorist? Do they know that the Quran orders Muslims to be terrorists? And are they committed to being a Muslim who follows Allah's and Muhammad's orders? If they answer yes, that they are a committed Muslim, they are committed to following Muhammad's example and Allah's orders, that would be my litmus test. I would expel them. If they say, no, I'm clueless. I really don't know anything about Islam. I think it's just, I was born a Muslim. I have no idea. I didn't know that Muhammad was a terrorist. I didn't know that most of the Quran is a call to arms. I am clueless. I'm stupid. I do this faith because I was born into it. Those people, I would say, all right, you can stay. But you're stupid, by the way. Because your own God says that as a peaceful person, you cease to be a Muslim, and that he says that he's asking good Muslims to kill you so that he can torture you in hell. So based upon that, you're really stupid. But you can stay. And anybody who answered that they actually know what Muhammad said and did, they know what the Quran says, and that they're following those orders and that example, I'd expel. That would be my standard.
I accept it. You're just as logical, as I would have said the same, but I didn't. I wanted to hear you. We agree on everything.
You said something that is interesting to me, and it's something that it bothers me a great deal about political correctness. It is something that I happen to agree with you on, which is that with political correctness, what the tendency is to disregard the rights of the victim to regard the rights of the perpetrator. And so here is Islam being responsible for 99% of the terrorist attacks in the world. This, by the way, was not a terrorist attack. It was a guerrilla attack because the victim was part of the military, not a civilian. But they perpetrate 99% of such attacks around the world. And so the difference between you and I and the media and politicians is that we're far more interested in protecting future victims than we are in protecting perceived rights of the perpetrators. And that when you are merciful, when you show mercy, when you show compassion to the merciless, you are being merciless.
Agreed.
It is one of the great misunderstandings of those who are poisoned by political correctness. They can't see that their tolerance and acceptance of a merciless, vicious dogma like Islam is actually merciless. They don't see that as themselves, but that's the result. In Nazi Germany, when the Nazis were rising to power, if you tolerated them, if you embraced them, if you said, everybody's entitled to their own thing, then you were complicit in what the aftermath of their rise to power wrought on the world, which was the death of over 50 million people. If you are a supporter of Islam, if you're one of these idiots that goes along defending the religion like Cameron did and said this has nothing to do with Islam, there's nothing in Islam that would cause this to happen, then you're a co-conspirator.
He is worse than the conspirator. He is worse because he's deceiving 68 million people in England.
You know what his justification was, and we'll speak about this when we return to Shattering Myths in a moment with IQ al-Rassooli, is that he said proof that this was not perpetrated by Islam is that Muslims are the primary victims of terrorism. If they're the victims of the terrorism, they can't be the perpetrators, the Prime Minister of Great Britain said. We'll return to that thought when Shattering Myths continues after the commercial break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Cameron, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, said, there is nothing in Islam that justifies this truly dreadful act. That is an outright lie. You're dealing with the Prime Minister of a country that has sworn an oath to protect his people, and under oath, he has lied. There is nothing in Islam that justifies this truly dreadful attack. Virtually everything in Islam justifies it, orders it, demands it. The fault lies solely with the sickening individuals who carried out this attack, as if they had no correlation whatsoever to Islam. He then said that terrorism has taken more Muslim lives than any other religion. Gee, do you wonder, Mr. Cameron, that the reason that Muslim lives are snuffed out far more by terrorism than any other religion is that 99% of terrorists today are Muslims, and that Muslims live around Muslims? Did you ever bother to think? We'll get to some proof that Islam justifies this truly dreadful act in a moment, but you're actually doing the thing that I would have done first if I had been Prime Minister of the UK. My first move would not be to stop immigration. I would have done that. My first move would not have been to export and expel those who were fundamentalist Muslims. Probably would have done that too. But the first thing I would have done is what you're doing. Just simply tell the truth. Tell the people the truth. Tell them that, yes, indeed, the reason this occurred is because of Islam. That here's what the Quran says, here's what the Hadith says, here's what Muhammad did, here's the history of the religion. It has killed hundreds of millions of people since its inception. It is a declaration of war on all humankind. It is a terrorist manifesto. So long as we tolerate Islam, this will continue to happen. And yet, in the face of a confession where these men stood around after hacking this soldier's head off and talked to cameras and hung around proudly proclaiming what they had done as if it were good. So they're twisted to the point that they thought that what they were doing was good and wanted credit for it. You have the complete and utter confession. And yet what the Prime Minister of the UK said is we ought to ignore all of that. And once we ignore all of that, then we can come to the conclusion that there is nothing in Islam that justifies this. If you're going to ignore the facts, what good is judgment? If you're going to ignore the facts, what good is knowing? What value is there in an investigation? What value is there in anything? If you're going to ignore knowing, if you're going to disregard the evidence, what is left?
But Yada, the same is happening in America.
Well, of
what
course.
happened at Fort Hood
Of course.
was a declaration of war in the name of Allah.
Yes.
And yet they said this is violence, workhouse violence. This was an act of terror.
Yeah.
We were talking about tolerance. I would like to repeat something I said it before to you. It's an axiom by Karl Popper. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance, even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. And who is the intolerant? Islam. Only one belief system from the creation till today is the most intolerant, most vile, most racist belief system the world has ever known, is Islam.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of things I liked about Yahowah. There's a lot of things. One of the things that I have come to like most about him is the thing that most people reject him because of, and that is he is intolerant. Yahowah is absolutely intolerant. He says that we ought to be opposed to religion, we ought to be opposed to political schemers because they lie, they're deceitful, they're unreliable, and that the tolerance of political and religious institutions has caused more harm than anything else on this planet. And if you really care for people, you need to be intolerant of these things. It's good advice. You can't love unless you hate that which is destructive, harmful to those you love. It's impossible.
Those who tolerate evil are intolerant of good.
That is correct. It is to be condemning of Islam is the most compassionate and the most merciful thing that a person can do in this world. Because there is nothing in this world more merciless than Islam. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We had a witness of the beheading that took place outside of London, who filmed the whole thing, said that he saw two men with meat cleavers and a butcher knife. Says they were hacking at this poor guy, literally. These two guys were crazed. They were just not there. They were animals. The brazenness of the attack, along with the fact that the men waited some 30 minutes for police to arrive while talking to cameras, seemed to indicate that they wanted to publicize their message. The men appeared like they wanted to be filmed. One of the attackers even going over to a bus and asking people to take photos of him because he wanted to be on TV. So what we have here not only is a confession to the crime, not only a witness, filmed witness of the butchery, but two men who were proud of what they had done, that what they thought that what they were doing was good. Is there anything other than religion that is capable of twisting a person's mind to this extreme, that they think beheading an innocent man and then bragging about it in the name of their religion is good? Is there anything other than Islam that could convince somebody to do this and to gloat about it?
You know, what bothers me, that most of the criminally negligent media, academia, and politicians keep using the erroneous and meaningless terms such as radical, extremist, or militant Islam, while no one in his or her right mind, ever use expressions such as militant communism or radical Nazism. Never.
Right. Ever.
They never use militant communism or radical Nazism. So why do we use these terms when it comes to Islam?
Yeah, you know, and the term radical would only apply to Islam if Islam was a fruit or a plant. Radical in botany means root. And so radical is appropriate if you're using the botanical definition of the term. But apart from the botanical definition, all other applications of radical suggest that it is different than the mainstream, that it is somehow an offshoot that is at the far extreme of the traditions of the religion. And yet all you have to do is read the Quran, and you'd find that the Islamic terrorist is walking in Muhammad's footsteps. Muhammad led 75 terrorist raids in the first 10 years of the Islamic era. Everything Muhammad said and did was predicated on the perpetration of terrorism. Without terrorism, Islam does not exist. Muhammad even said, "I have become victorious with terror." And so what you're dealing with in Islam is the antithesis of an extreme or a corruption of the religion. It is 100% of Islamic terrorists are 100% fundamentalists.
And they are not, what fundamentalist means, as we said, they are literally following the letter of the Quran and Muhammad's Sunnah. Right. That's why they cannot find what they're doing, and they are doing something wrong. How could they possibly be doing something wrong if Allah sanctified their deeds?
Right. So
from their point of view, they are doing God's will. But Allah is not God.
Correct.
This is the tragedy of it. Most human beings have been fooled into thinking that Allah is the same as the God of Jesus, Moses, and Abraham.
Correct.
But Allah is not the same.
Correct. Allah is not Yahowah. Now, the reason, IQ, that you and I have devoted so much of our lives to exposing and condemning Islam is this reason. Is that if people understood, particularly Muslims, understood that Allah is a complete fraud, that Allah is not God, that the Quran is rubbish, that Muhammad was the most perverted and disgusting man who ever lived, that if they knew the truth about Islam, if they knew the truth about the Hadith, then they would not be compelled to kill in the name of this wannabe deity. If they knew for certain, as we do, which is why we do this, that Muhammad was a complete fraud, and that Islam is the dumbest, most vicious, most ruthless, most repulsive religion ever conceived by man, that it is absolutely untrue, then you wouldn't gloat about killing in the name of your God, because you would know that what you're doing is reprehensible. But they don't.
No, they
because the vast preponderance of people in the media and in politics and in religion speak of Allah as being God. They speak of Islam being a great religion, including the President of the United States. And because politicians lie on behalf of the religious continue to kill on behalf of the religion. There is one tool, IQ, that can be wielded successfully against a lie. Only one. And it's not bullets and bombs. It's not drones. It's the truth.
Correct. You know that, I know that, but our leaders don't know that. Ladies and gentlemen who are listening, the sole purpose of Islam upon earth is to turn every human being into the zombies that they are. Their mantra is simple. They tell it to you in 70 languages. It says, Allah is our objective. Muhammad is our prophet. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way. And dying in the way of Allah, al-mawtu fi sabilillah, is our highest aspiration. Which part of this statement does anyone who has 2 brain cells of logic cannot understand? I don't know.
Let me read from the Quran, the 8th surah. Allah wished to confirm the truth by his words. Wipe the infidels out to the last. Your Lord inspired the angels with the message, I am with you. Give firmness to the believers. I will terrorize the unbelievers. Therefore smite them on their necks and every joint and incapacitate them. Strike off their heads and cut off each of their fingers and toes. Quran 8:12. 8:15. Believers, when you meet unbelieving infidels in battle while you are marching for war, never turn your backs and retreat. If anyone turns his back on such a day and retreats, unless it is a stratagem of war, a maneuver to hide or rally his side, he draws upon himself the wrath of Allah, and hell will be his abode. Quran 8:39. So fight them until all opposition ends. And the only religion is Islam. Are you listening, Prime Minister Cameron? 8:45. O believers, when you meet an army, be firm and think of Allah's name much so that you may prosper. 8:57. And when you meet them in battle, inflict on them such a defeat as would be a lesson for those who would come after them, that they may be warned, they may be terrorized. Quran 8:58. If you apprehend treachery from any group on any part of people, retaliate by breaking off the treaty with them. The infidels should not think that they can bypass Allah. Surely they cannot get away. The unbelieving infidels should not think that they can bypass Islam. They cannot escape. 8:59. The infidels should not think that they should get away from us. Prepare against them whatever arms and weaponry you can muster, so that you may terrorize them. For they are your enemy and Allah's enemy.
8:55, you missed it. For the worst of beasts in the sight of Allah are those who reject Him. They will not believe. La yu'minuna. Ladies and gentlemen, these beasts that Allah is mentioning are all unbelievers. Currently, unbelievers represent 80% of humanity. 5,500 million human beings. All Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, atheists, agnostics. That is any and all those who are not Muslims.
IQ, we have Jason from Toronto who is calling in and wants to ask a question regarding Muslim motivations. Go ahead, Jason. You're on with IQ al-Rassooli.
Thanks, Yada. I had a question because that small snippet of an interview with the Muslim with his hands all bloody and attempting to justify what he was doing. You know, I see that theme a lot. It seems like the Muslims really play into and are deceived by, that they are the victims.
Correct.
It seems to be one of the major motivations that's more subtle, and yet that seems to be the case. They think that everybody is victimizing them, and I was hoping maybe you guys could elaborate on,
Sure. Let me answer it, and then I want IQ to answer it. That's the Quran's attitude. The Quran presents Muslims as the victims, and therefore they are justified in lashing out, when in fact it's the Muslims who are the perpetrators. And the fact is that when this Muslim said that he was angry because the British had sent troops to kill Muslims, the fact of the matter is that Muslims kill vastly more Muslims than do anyone else. And it's only because Muslims lashed out to kill non-Muslims that Great Britain was there in a Muslim country anyway. And so it is when you're poisoned by a religious lie, truth is always inverted. And so here the Muslims who are the perpetrators of murder view themselves as the victims, And so they lash out based upon an upending of the truth, literally a reversal of truth. What have you to say on this, IQ?
The question that he asked is so good. It is really fantastic. Let me explain something to him. When Muhammad started preaching 1400 years ago among the pagan Arabs, he insulted their religion. He insulted their forefathers. He tried to destroy all their belief system of hundreds of years. And yet he said that he was the victim of their anger. Now my question to any Muslim listening, if anybody goes to a mosque today, anywhere on earth, and shouts that Allah is not God and that Muhammad is a fraud, how many seconds does he have to live? 5 seconds maximum.
Yeah.
And yet the Arabs of pagan Arabia tolerated Muhammad. They did not kill him. They could have cut his head off any time they wanted to. Muslims always pretend to be victims when in fact they have never been victims. I repeat the word. Islam has never been a victim. Islam has always been the victimizer pretending to be a victim. I hope it answers you.
Yeah. In other words, truth is upended. It's the nature of Islam. That which Islam claims to be true is untrue. That which Islam claims to be good is bad. That which it claims to be noble is evil. Everything in Islam is upside down and reversed, just as is Satan's claims that Allahu Akbar, that he is greater than Yahowah. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment. Shattering Myths. We're here with IQ al-Rassooli, and Jason has called in from Toronto with an interesting call, and where Muslims claim to be the victims. You know, in the 1920s, Adolf Hitler rose to power by claiming that the Germans, rather than being the victimizers, the perpetrator of war, were the victims of France and Great Britain and the Treaty of Versailles, and that they were the victims of ruthless Jews, and so they needed to resolve that issue. And they were justified, therefore, in starting World War II to resolve the fact that they had been victims. Now, in the case of Muslims today, they all think that they are victimized by Israel and the United States, and that the terrible plight for Muslims in the world is a result of Jews and America. And as a result of that mindset, and the rage that it is developing, the same thing's going to happen in World War III that happened in World War II. So the question that you've asked, Jason, this perverted mindset that the perpetrators are the victims, it caused the last World War, and it's going to cause the next one. What do you think, IQ?
Agreed, 100%. May I say something?
Sure.
Which I forgot to tell you if I were, let's say, Prime Minister of England, which I missed. I would spend one whole month to have every TV station discuss every single verse in the Quran and have imams to defend themselves.
Me too.
That would be the ultimate destruction of Muhammad and Islam.
Yeah, when I wrote the book, Tea with Terrorists, and I had a 3-part plan for ridding the world of Islamic terrorism in 90 days. The first objective on that plan was to do exactly what you just said, which is to dominate the news. Being President of the United States, I would have said, all right, for the next 3 months, every night on the news, for at least 2 to 3 hours, we're going to expose what the Islamic scriptures say. And we're going to reveal them, and we're going to discuss them. And the result would have been the same thing as what happened in the 1920s, IQ, when some people decided that they were going to make the internal documents of the Ku Klux Klan available for people to read, and made it front page news. And when people actually saw how disgusting the Klan was, they lost 95% of their members in 2 years. It became impossible for them to recruit new members, and the Klan has all but dissolved as a result of the exposure as how repulsive it was. The same thing is true with Islam. If you were given that opportunity and could conduct those kinds of news conferences and debates over the course of months on the television and radio, Islam would cease to exist as a religion.
Absolutely.
Be gone. Be gone. And 99% of the terrorism that is perpetrated in the world would be gone, and the world would not endure World War III, which is inevitable because you're not Prime Minister.
And Yada, this is the cheapest way of doing it, not only financially, but in human resources.
Of course. The United States squandered $6 trillion, 1 million lives, in an approach to Islam that all it did is enrage the religion more. Manufactured more jihadists, which was to invade 2 Islamic countries. That was George Bush's response to it. $6 trillion, 10,000 American dead, 1 million Muslims dead, and made a bad situation worse. Where if instead he had said, all right, we're going to take 2 hours every night, maybe 3 hours every night, and for the next 90 days we're going to discuss Islam. We're going to use words. We're going to use reason. Evidence and reason, and we're going to expose and condemn the motivations of those who flew planes into our buildings. Islamic terrorism would be a thing of the past. Islam as a religion would cease to exist on this planet.
Because we could have that in public with debate with Muslims.
Of course.
They have to defend their position. You know?
And they can't. And they can't.
To defend them.
Because what you're doing is by exposing Islam, you're quoting from the Quran and Hadith. And so there is no way to respond other than to say, well, my God lied. My prophet lied. Okay, well, if your God and prophet lied and you're going to contradict your God and prophet, then what have you left?
Nothing.
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 And so that's why I've said, when I wrote Prophet of Doom, I said there is absolutely no way to refute it. You cannot write a rebuttal to this. It's impossible, because the only thing you could do is to quote a passage from somewhere that says, okay, we should be peaceful, when I've got 5,000 that said we should kill. And if you did find the peaceful one, how do you resolve the fact that your God and prophet had all of these others that said we should kill? All you're proving is that he contradicted himself. And then what do you have?
Nothing.
Nothing. And that's the goal of having IQ al-Rassooli on this program, is because if we can expose and condemn Islam, there'll be nothing left of Islam. And tragedies like what happened in London will cease to occur again. I'm Yada. This has been Shattering Myths. We'll be with you again next week. Thank you, IQ. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.